When we look up to our personal heroes, the ones who inspire us and motivate us in our daily lives, we often fail to appreciate how they were able to become what they are. As much as we hear that such great figures were once normal people, with struggles and fears like anybody else, it seems impossible to think of those heroes as anything other than what they are now. They're beyond us, reaching heights greater than we can possibly imagine. Consequently, to those of us still on the ground, the prospect of reaching similar heights seems utterly absurd. Those who do reach those heights often feel just as amazed as those who watched them ascend. The step-by-step progression of such heroes are often small, even undetectable. But in those grand triumphs when they look out from the mountain peak, all those minuscule moments of struggle, heartache, and pain all seem to come together in one grand orchestra of achievement and satisfaction. Every legend has a beginning. Every hero has their story. And even the greatest who have ever been have had that moment where they left what was easy and comfortable and decided that it was time to take a stand. They took up their blades, raised them skyward, and began their journey to heights and depths never before reached, eventually placing themselves among legends. Motivated by desire, by duty, or perhaps by something as simple as love. A quick look at Nintendo's consoles over the years is enough to show that conventional has never been a word to describe them. From the Zapper of the original NES to the Joy-Cons of the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo has always been looking for new and unique ways to provide entertainment to its players. No other console illustrates that innovation more than the Nintendo Wii. With a simple and surprisingly intuitive design, the Wii's motion-controlled system made gaming not just fun, but accessible, drawing in audiences from all walks of life, and producing games that never would have had the chance to exist in the market before. The idea of using simple motions to execute basic, yet realistic actions unlocked a whole new world of what could be possible in both new titles and existing franchises. The prospect of a Wii game for The Legend of Zelda was in itself a no-brainer. The shape of the Wiimote resembling a sword hilt made any game involving swordplay an ideal fit. With Twilight Princess, Nintendo was able to execute simple, yet effective motion controls that worked well for the sword and the other items in the game. With its next outing on the Wii, Nintendo made sure that swordplay wasn't just a highlight, but the focus of the entire game. As the development of Link's swordplay progressed, so did its plot, eventually becoming an origin story for the entirety of Hyrule and focused on the Master Sword. Finally, after 25 years of adventuring with Link, saving Princess Zelda, and defeating Ganon, we would finally see how it all began. Strangely enough, before we can get into those grand origins, we somehow have to go even farther back. The opening sequence tells in dramatic fashion of a time soon after the formation of the world, when the peoples of the earth were terrorized by evil forces that sought a divine power that was protected by its guardian deity. Unable to fully protect both the golden power and humanity on the surface, the goddess sent them both skyward, out of the hands of darkness. There's an interesting juxtaposition in these opening scenes that both mirrors and emphasizes a similar pattern in previous games and fantasy stories in general. We've just been told a dramatic story involving gods, demons, and the fate of the world. And already we're seeing hints that similar forces are being set in motion. Obviously, this would be a pretty boring game if nothing dramatic happened, but those images of terror and grandeur are twice cut off to show just how bright, peaceful, and beautiful Skyloft is. It's an idyllic life that anyone would be happy to live in without a care in the world, which emphasizes the massive trials that our protagonists are about to undertake. The melody of a harp and a woman's voice quickly dispelled the darkness we had just witnessed. And although Link's dreams pretend to a grand destiny just around the corner, they are sharply interrupted by a Loftwing, bringing word from a certain childhood friend. Here we see Zelda in a way that is truly unique to the franchise. For the one and only time in this entire series, she is not Princess Zelda. Not a ruler, not a foreign, mystical figure. She is simply Zelda. Our Zelda. And just like Minish Cap, we already have a relationship with her. But that lack of a title or any kind of grand heritage that we're aware of puts us for once on equal footing with her. To strengthen that bond further, we hear of their childhood, see how that has affected them, and observe firsthand the relationship that has developed. One that is easily the most heartfelt and most intimate we have ever seen. It's also a very playful one, and Zelda's urging for Link to get prepared for the day's competition would have just been a fun nudge had Link's Loftwing not been held back by a very mean-spirited prank. So begins our exploration of Skyloft, and our introduction to a very entertaining little love triangle. Groose is quickly shown to be a stereotypical bully. Not the smartest, and definitely the most delusional. His jealousy of Link's relationship with Zelda is apparent, and Zelda obviously doesn't have the patience for any of it. The only ammunition Groose has against Link is Link's apparent lack of motivation, which is interesting, because it's something both Zelda and her father have already pointed out. Link has a lot of natural ability, but his paradisiacal life above the clouds has made it difficult for him to have any concrete ambition. At this point, there are only two major loves in his life: Zelda and his Loftwing. That second love is enough to drive Link to action, and the search for his bird eventually leads him to borrow a sword from the Academy and work through the only dangerous cave on the island. Here, our true experience with motion controls begins. Armed with improved tech for the Wiimote, Link's actions with his sword and eventually his shield are dependent on our physical movement, adding a level of engagement that up to this point was completely impossible to experience. The sword in particular requires purposeful and thoughtful control, as every action and attack require those exact motions from your body. Swordplay, after all, is more than just slashing at whatever's in your way. Jump it too quickly, and you're likely to have your attack deflected, leaving you open to a potential counter. Even some of the most basic enemies have defenses that must be identified and evaded, creating a miniature puzzle right in the middle of the fight. In such conflicts, the presence of a shield to defend against attacks and leave enemies vulnerable is just as useful as the appropriate slash. This is where a lot of people have reported frustrations with the game, as Link's motions haven't always been able to reflect that of the player. Such encounters, however, won't occur until later. For now, all you need to do is defend yourself long enough to free your bird. With a leap and a whistle, you're off into the wild blue yonder. There's something awe-inspiring about seeing nothing but an endless stretch of cloud and sky. Flying itself is a pretty basic affair, and as soon as you're allowed to roam freely, you have almost the entirety of the sky immediately open to you. The problem is that the sky is pretty true to its name. Like Wind Waker's ocean, it's open and empty. Aside from Skyloft, there are only a handful of islands floating out amongst the clouds, and very few of them are anything more than a small platform. There are some fun locations, and a few interesting characters out there. But for the most part, you're just making your way from one point to the next with very little to get in your way. It's probably better that way, since precise aiming while flying can be pretty tricky. The only major impediment to your flying during the graduation ceremony is Groose and his gang, who are really only there to harass you. One way or another, it isn't too long before you claim victory and earn both advancement as a knight and a private moment with Zelda. The romantic undertones in their relationship are palpable in these scenes, even if Zelda once again is shoving Link off a precariously high perch. Perhaps it's just her nature, but maybe it's something more. For the sun doesn't set before Zelda, metaphorically, has pushed Link off the comfy roost of his home and into something far beyond his imagination. On their celebratory date, a dark twister throws both Link and Zelda off their birds. Link barely makes it home alive, and Zelda is nowhere to be found. Troubled again by dreams of prophecy, this time darkened by visions of Zelda in danger, Link awakens first to the headmaster, and then to a mysterious floating figure who leads him through the night to the Tower of the Goddess and hidden chamber inside. There, he is able to confront this figure as she lays before him his destiny. Here we are introduced to Fi, the spirit of the goddess blade and the guide crafted by the goddess Hylia to lead her chosen hero on the path to a grand fate. Her role is centered on your success, and she's very good at it, providing clear direction on where you should go and what you should do to move forward in your quest. Her analysis is also very effective when dealing with enemies and analyzing points of interest. Still, for all this practical utility, Fi's personality leaves a lot to be desired. Instead of the usual energy, emotion, and even downright sass we have come to expect from our companions, Fi is direct, matter-of-fact, and seemingly emotionless. With her analytical style, constant use of statistics, and utterly flat delivery, robotic seems to be the most fitting word for her. As Fi herself acknowledges, she is but a tool created by the goddess, and she is singularly focused on fulfilling that role. And it appears she isn't the only one. As you make your way through the newly opened gap in the clouds and onto the surface, you soon meet a wizened old woman who not only expected you, but had expected you and Zelda both. Both of you apparently meant to embark on a grand quest together. In order to get that plan back on track, your first objective is to do exactly what you had come here to do: find Zelda. So the grand chase begins, one that will ultimately last the entirety of the game. Utilizing both Fi and your sword via dowsing, you're led through the obstacles and varied terrains of the surface world. Each region of the surface provides an environmental theme that reflects areas that we have grown used to over the years. Veterans of the series will immediately recognize a peak reflecting Death Mountain, the deserts that will eventually belong to the Gerudo, and the forests where the Deku Tree will one day thrive. Each little section on the surface has its own mini challenges and environmental puzzles, and with statues granting access to the sky all over the place, it's easy to leave, get supplies, and come back whenever you need to. Strangely enough, those regions are somehow separated from each other, ensuring that the events in one area have little effect on any other. The major connection between them all is the sky above, which benefits from special cubes you locate on the surface that activate chests among the clouds, giving you plenty of reasons to explore every nook and cranny of every realm you visit. As is often the case, the dungeons in Skyward Sword are also reflective of the varied environments of the game. But the motion controls and setting of the game allowed Nintendo to provide a truly unique experience. Directional keys, riding boulders, time shift stones, and more. make these dungeons some of the most creative in the series. At the same time, they're highlights of just what makes the traditional Zelda dungeons so engaging. Despite making your way from entrance to goal, the passageways loop back on themselves, require repeated passes, and are often hiding secrets big and small, only revealing themselves once the dungeon treasure is obtained. These new and varied elements include creatures and enemies we've never encountered before. And far from just an untamed wilderness with dangers at every turn, several species have had their homes in societies on the surface for centuries. From kikwis and mogmas to robots and Paria, there's always a new face waiting around the corner. Character interactions are a major part of Skyward Sword. Like with any epic story, the importance of the adventure is measured not in lives saved, but in lives touched. Fitting for the art style, the characters you find both in the sky and on the surface are colorful in design and personality, providing rich and sometimes hilarious interactions. To add further personal connection, several side quests occur as the result of your own efforts, both for good and bad. As you actively search for those who need your help, their gratitude is manifest in small, yet tangible ways that make every engagement all the more satisfying. Vi, of course, is the one you interact with the most, which annoys a lot of people as she isn't exactly the best at conversation. But despite her rigid personality, it doesn't stop her from making her own unique observations. Choices that you make in dialogue or adventuring can elicit specific responses from her that hold just a hint of approval or disappointment. The more exuberant characters around you seem to draw the most noticeable reactions from her. While her growth is not as obvious as others we've traveled with, hints are there, if hidden behind the numbers. In stark and disturbing contrast is her opposite number. As you near the final chamber of the first dungeon, you meet not a typical boss, but a fellow visitor to the dungeon, who also has his eyes set on Zelda, the demon lord who commands the hordes of the surface world, Girahim. His design, flamboyant gestures, and flowery speech already place him among the most compelling characters in the series. And his unnerving thirst for blood and torture is enough to creep you out every time you meet him. Like with any good villain, Girahim's hubris pushes him to simply toy with you, which only enrages him when you take advantage of it. But despite losing every conflict, Girahim maintains a distinct level of power and intimidation, reminding you that you would be but a gnat to him if you let your guard down. It's all you can do, really, to simply delay him long enough for Zelda to escape his clutches, remaining just beyond yours as well. And so you move on to the next chapter of the story. Aside from the motion controls, this is where people tend to lay criticism on this game. The Zelda franchise is known not just for its fantasy setting and themes, but for its open-world environment. The original game pretty much just dropped you into Hyrule and said, "Good luck, try not to die." Later installments refined and expanded on this to varying degrees, but ultimately let players go nearly anywhere they wanted as long as they had the right items. Skyward Sword purposefully blocks off entire regions with a railroaded story in a very predictable pattern. Chase Zelda, Zelda's moved. Chase Zelda, Zelda's moved again. Phase 2 is a simple revisiting of each region with some new additions, and Phase 3 barely adds anything at all. The entire time, Fi's in your ear telling you where to go and what to do in an incessant manner that outstrips even Navi. If you aren't truly invested in the story, then you are very likely going to get frustrated. Honestly, I was in the same boat. When I first started playing Skyward Sword, I really wasn't all that invested. Skyloft was pretty, the playstyle was unique, and I adored the relationship between Link and Zelda, But truthfully, I wasn't really into the game. For some reason, Skyward Sword only had my interest because it was Zelda. I was already on the surface, through the first dungeon, and I was just okay. I didn't hate it, but something was missing. Then I traveled to Elden Volcano. Alerted to the fact that Zelda had been captured, I rushed through the Earth Temple to her rescue. I admit, I was excited. It seemed like I was going to have a brand new experience. Perhaps I would travel with Zelda like in Spirit Tracks, actively protect her, maybe get some of the adventure from her perspective. But no, Zelda had been freed by another. At Dungeon's End, I found both her and Impa preparing to depart without me. I was denied my chance to protect Zelda, and instead, Impa rebuked me for being so late. I remember standing there, in real life, for several seconds, in shock and disbelief. Late? I did everything I could to get here! I know I skipped several offshoots and side passages, probably ran by several secrets on the way, and still, Impa had the nerve to... And that's when it hit me. My heart was now fully devoted to the quest, and so I dove into the rest of the adventure. I'm not sure if Nintendo had planned for that moment to be the big turning point in Link's story, or just one of several points scattered along the way. But this story is so focused on Link's growth as a hero that the first major goal was to ensure that his and our motivation was genuine and strong enough to face the trials that awaited. The second phase of the game is designed to make sure that not only is Link's blade tempered to pure perfection, but also to confirm that Link is both strong enough and worthy enough to wield it. Not only do the dungeons require intelligence and battle prowess, leading to sacred flames that empower your blade, but the Silent Realms call out to Link's spirit alone. Avoiding the guardians inside requires stealth, planning, and some pure recklessness, which draws forth and strengthens the depths of Link's power, wisdom, and courage. When all is said and done, and we finally travel the endless ages to where Zelda is waiting, she acknowledges our stature and grants us the Master Sword's final blessing. It's an effort that makes one wonder about the actual purpose of dungeons in the Zelda franchise. Obviously, they are some of the primary goals in our adventures, filled with vicious monsters, unique items, and usually some great artifact that we're supposed to collect. But it's also true that through those same dungeons, we obtain advancement in our skills and our literal life force in a manner that's similar to every RPG out there. We grow through those challenges, slowly changing and evolving from a normal, insignificant youth into a hero. All it takes is the opportunity and the courage to take advantage of it. And that's exactly what Zelda had intended. As she explains the history of the Triforce, the Demon King, and her own divine origins, it becomes clear that not just were these events predicted, they were planned specifically for you by the goddess Hylia, by Zelda. In a grand bid to eliminate the source of supreme evil in the world, the goddess Hylia planned for the emotions and affections of Link towards Zelda and manipulated them into creating the warrior she needed to use both the Master Sword and the Triforce. Zelda admits it herself. She used us. Throughout the franchise and through nearly every incarnation of Hyrule's princess, Zelda has apologized to Link. Apologized for having to rely on his strength and courage when Link, for all intents and purposes, had almost no business being involved. Link is almost always an outsider, simply helping because time and circumstance put him there. But here, not only are we intimately involved, but Zelda intentionally put us in this position and pulled our heartstrings to force us to where she needed us. Easily a moment to lose faith in her. But the emotions in Zelda's face and words communicates clearly how much this breaks her heart. Not only that, but she's willing to pay the price for her incarnation's grand scheme. Living in stasis for millennia, holding back this darkness, trusting that her Link will come and wake her up. At this point, you're already well acquainted with the kind of evil you're up against. Just outside the sealed temple lays a massive pit with a seal at the bottom. After the initial chase across the surface, Impa instructs you to return there. It isn't long after you do so that the seal breaks, and a massive, dark entity rises from its depths. The Imprisoned has the most distinct form in the game, due primarily to the fact that it contrasts radically, not just from the environment, but from the entire art style of the game. It's a massive void of darkness and inevitability that makes a slow march towards the temple in Zelda's sealed form. Lacking the power to destroy it, you can only repeatedly push it back and seal it again. Aided by an unlikely ally. Your descent to the temple is hijacked by Groose, who is determined to be Zelda's hero and completely unaware of what he's getting himself into. Shocked by the surface, enraged by the old woman's denial of his desired objective, and justifiably terrified by the Imprisoned, Groose initially can only stand back in awe at Link's bravery and skill. Depressed, then surprisingly motivated, Groose develops from a bully to something of a hero in his own right, constructing an impressive catapult system, then risking his own life in defense of others. It's an arc that's unexpected and very welcome, giving Groose a wonderful improvement in personality and endearing him to many in the Zelda community. An added defense to the sealed temple, while Link searches high and low for the keys to the Triforce. The final phase of the game is, in a way, a review of the phases that came before it. You begin with an aerial battle as you work to free the sky spirit Levias from a nasty parasite. Your quest then returns to the surface as you revisit the lands and people you had seen before to acquire parts of a sacred melody. The song then grants you access to one final trial, dodging the Guardians inside for the final tears that will allow you to enter the Triforce's resting place. The final dungeon itself is a review of the dungeons that came before it, implemented in a way that truly lives up to the distinction of a final test. Really, the only thing that's missing from all this is a boss rush. Oh, wait. Step by step, you acquire the 3 pieces of the Triforce. And with your wish granted, the Tower of the Goddess breaks the cloud barrier and utterly crushes the newly freed Imprisoned. The music plays, Fi offers her congratulations, and Link rushes in to awaken the one he risked it all to save. Such a happy moment. Couldn't get any better. But it certainly can get a whole lot worse. For Girahim has witnessed it all and refuses to give up so easily. Taking advantage of everyone's fatigue, he rips Zelda from the others and makes his way to the past, eager to revive his master where and when he is still alive. Link gives fervent chase, slaying an entire army single-handed as he makes his way down the pit to where Girahim is performing his demonic ritual. But even defeating Girahim isn't enough, for the spell had already been cast, and the summoning of the imprisoned is enough to deprive Zelda of her soul and revive the Demon King, Demise. Demise is imposing, if not as innately charismatic like the Ganondorf we all know so well. His immediate dispatching of Girahim is evidence enough of his strength. With the entire game focused on swordplay and the Master Sword, it only makes sense that the final conflict is a duel. Demise's strength, speed, and skill with the blade are nothing to take lightly. And as the battle progresses, you also have lightning to contend with. A moment's hesitation and you are quickly struck down. Defend and counter is your primary strategy, looking for that momentary gap to deal a modicum of damage. And yet the demon is unyielding, a wall of darkness that will not break. And even when he's finally defeated and the Master Sword plunged into him, Demise refuses to give in, uttering a curse that is fated to follow the spirit of the hero and the blood of the goddess for all eternity. But Demise himself is no more, and Zelda's soul is reclaimed. The light and peace we worked so hard for, finally achieved. And so, at Journey's End, it is at last time for the hero to rest. And that means putting down his sword. But this time, putting down the sword means leaving a companion. And yet, despite the strange, mechanical relationship we had with her, saying goodbye to Fi is hard. As annoying as she often was, with little to offer beyond numbers and directions, there's something about this departure that hurts. We may not have noticed what was happening, but Fi was carefully observing our fight and the people we were helping along the way. And she was growing as a result, learning what it meant to be a hero, and taking pride in the efforts that she and Link were making together. I do not have the capability to fully understand the human spirit, Link, she says. But now, at the end of my journey with you, as I prepare to sleep within the Master Sword forever, I experience a feeling I am unable to identify. I lack sufficient data to be sure of my conclusion, but I believe this feeling correlates closest to what your people call happiness. That happiness and that growth is what draws such an emotional response from us. As much as we found her irksome at times, this is our sword, our blade, our partner. And in this time we got to spend with her, she learned and grew as we did. Our forging of the Master Sword was not just tempering it with a holy flame, but strengthening our bond with it, imbuing it with a spirit that knew firsthand what it meant to be a hero. Fi understood the significance of that, and was eternally grateful for everything it implied. In my experience with The Legend of Zelda, I have always found a simple tale. A child who finds within themselves the courage to overcome the most impossible of odds. Such strength is not innately part of someone. It's developed over countless trials, failures, and successes, finding new tools and developing new skills to conquer the challenges set before you. Sometimes you'll find success quickly. Other times, they'll seem impossibly out of reach. But as you keep trying, holding to the ones who support you, and pressing forward to the light that lies before you, you will find the power, wisdom, and courage to make it through. and grant the utmost desires of your heart. Skyward Sword epitomizes that journey. The journey of the hero, of the goddess incarnate, and the light they carry to hold back the evil that threatens them all. The journey of a youth who finds themselves in something utterly beyond them, and yet has the faith, the hope, and eventually the strength to make a difference. And as you press forward on your journey, you will be able to do the same. Overcome challenges, find new strengths, and help others along the way. And as you face your demons, with the faith and the strength you have gained from yourself and others, you will be able to raise your sword skyward, upheld by words spoken by so many before, by so many who will follow, and echoed by our constant companion. Thank you, Master Link. May we meet again in another life. Thank you so much to all of you for coming along in this retelling of Skyward Sword. I cannot tell you how hard it was to write this script, and how happy I am to express my love for what is thus far my favorite game in the Zelda franchise. As such, there are so many parts of this game that I couldn't talk about in detail and would love to hear about from all of you. Let me know your favorite parts and why you enjoyed them so much. Things have been a bit slow on my end, working through as much as I can on so many different things and trying to express my creativity in what ways I enjoy. But I'm still sharing what I can. If you enjoy seeing what's going on with my Zelda adventures, you can subscribe down below. If you want to watch me live as I play through games, Zelda, and others, you can catch me over on my Twitch channel. That link is in the description, along with the links to my playthrough of Skyward Sword and all my other Zelda tributes. Join me next time, as the three-dimensional gets just a little bit more two-dimensional, as we revisit a classic Hyrule with a fresh coat of paint. In The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds. See you then.